For most of the Mesozoic era, the rules were simple. Large teeth meant danger. Small body meant vulnerability. Predators hunted prey. The hierarchy was clear, and almost every animal alive understood its place within it. And then, evolution did something that still surprises paleontologists today. It took the prey and made it dangerous. Not by giving it claws or venom or speed, but by giving it something far more effective and far harder to see coming. Something that fundamentally changed what it meant to be a predator in the Cretaceous world. Something that, when we finally understood it from the fossil record, forced scientists to completely rethink the relationship between hunter and hunted. And within that ecosystem, there was a dynamic that researchers spent decades overlooking because it seemed too counterintuitive to take seriously. The ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, the family that includes Triceratops, were not passive herbivores. The evidence from their bones, their biomechanics, and the injuries found on their predators tells a story that is considerably more violent and considerably more sophisticated than the classic image of a plant eater placidly grazing while Tyrannosaur circled. These animals fought back, actively, powerfully, and with an effectiveness that left marks on the fossil record. Triceratops is the most famous ceratopsian, and a good place to start. But what the fossils actually tell us about this animal goes far beyond the popular image. A fully grown Triceratops weighed somewhere between 6 and 12 metric tons. Its skull, one of the largest of any land animal ever to have lived, could reach nearly 3 meters in length, roughly a third of its total body mass. The 3 horns that give it its name were not decorative. Biomechanical studies of the horn structure, the neck musculature, and the frill support system show clearly that these were load-bearing combat weapons capable of generating and absorbing enormous force. Paleontologist Andrew Farkey, who has spent years studying ceratopsian skulls, found evidence of healed wounds on Triceratops frills and skulls that match the pattern you'd expect from horn-to-horn combat between members of the same species. These animals fought each other hard and survived. If they fought each other with that force, what happened when they turned that force on something trying to eat them? In 2009, paleontologist Joseph Peterson and colleagues documented Tyrannosaurus specimens with deep puncture wounds and gouges on the facial bones, wounds that match, in size and shape, the horns of large ceratopsians. Crucially, several of these wounds showed signs of healing. The Tyrannosaurus had survived the encounter, which means there were encounters, actual physical confrontations between the 2 largest animals in their ecosystem, and they didn't always go the way we'd assume. Think about what that means. The most powerful predator of the Cretaceous, an animal with a bite force that could crush bone, with a skull designed for catastrophic impact, was being wounded by its prey, was being forced to heal, to recover, to approach future hunts with the knowledge that this particular prey could hurt it. Whether Tyrannosaurus was capable of learning from that experience in the way we might understand it, that's a question that takes us into deeply uncertain territory. But the fossil evidence of repeated healed wounds suggests, at minimum, that survival required navigating a world where the prey was genuinely dangerous. But Triceratops was only one part of this story, because across the ceratopsian family, from the small and fast Protoceratops of Mongolia to the enormous Pentaceratops and Styracosaurus of North America, a pattern emerges that suggests something more than individual defensive behavior. There is fossil evidence, though debated, of ceratopsians in groups. Bone beds containing multiple individuals of the same species, accumulated in ways that suggest they died together, possibly in floods, possibly while moving in herds. The herd hypothesis for ceratopsians has been contested, but several researchers argue that the skeletal evidence, combined with what we know about the energetics of defense in modern large herbivores, points towards some degree of social cohesion. And here is where the comparison to modern animals becomes genuinely illuminating. African buffalo, often cited by rangers as the most dangerous animal in Africa, more deadly annually than lions, demonstrate exactly this dynamic in the modern world. Individual buffaloes are dangerous. Herds of buffalo will actively mob lions, encircling them, goring them, occasionally killing them. Lions that hunt buffalo have significantly shorter lifespans than lions that hunt other prey. The predator pays a cost for choosing dangerous prey. Researchers who study predator-prey coevolution have documented this cost across dozens of modern species. When prey develops effective defenses, physical, behavioral, or social, predators must either evolve countermeasures, switch to safer prey, or accept elevated injury and mortality rates. There is no free lunch in the arms race between hunter and hunted. The Cretaceous was running exactly this arms race.
And the ceratopsians were winning enough rounds of it to leave scars on the apex predator of their world. If you find this as extraordinary as I do, join me for more expeditions into prehistoric life. Every week, I follow the fossil evidence wherever it leads. Subscribe and don't miss what's coming next.
There is one more dimension to this story that I've been holding back, because it requires the context of everything that came before it to land properly. The question of what a Triceratops was actually doing when it defended itself, whether it was responding to immediate threat reflexively, or whether it was making something resembling a decision, touches on one of the most contested areas in paleontology, the question of dinosaur cognition. We have very limited direct evidence of how dinosaur brains were organized. Endocasts, natural or artificial casts of the brain cavity, give us the overall size and shape of the brain, but not its internal wiring. What we can say is that ceratopsian brains were, relative to body size, comparable to those of modern large reptiles. Not the complex social processors of mammals or birds, but not simple reflex machines either. What's more revealing is the behavioral evidence. The healed wounds on ceratopsian skulls from intraspecific combat suggest these animals were capable of assessing threat, choosing engagement over flight, and surviving repeated confrontations. That requires, at minimum, a nervous system capable of behavioral flexibility. Whether it rises to anything we'd recognize as intelligence is a question that science cannot currently answer, and I find that uncertainty genuinely exciting rather than frustrating.
Because it means there is still something to discover, still a gap between what the bones tell us and what the living animal actually experienced. What this story ultimately tells us is something about evolution that I find endlessly compelling, that the direction of change is never predetermined. The assumption that predators drive the arms race, that prey is always reactive, always catching up, turns out to be wrong. Prey can lead, prey can innovate, prey can become the most dangerous thing in an ecosystem. 75 million years ago, on the floodplains of what is now Montana, something was walking through a world of enormous predators and refusing to be simply food. It carried 3 horns on a skull built like a battering ram, and somewhere in that small ceratopsian brain, it processed enough of its world to make the calculation: stand and fight. The scars on the predator's bones are the record of that calculation. Not words, not fossils of the behavior itself, just the damage left behind. The evidence that something fought back hard enough to leave a mark. In a world 75 million gone, that evidence is the closest we will ever get to the inner life of an animal that never had one. And I think that's extraordinary enough. If this arms race between predator and prey has drawn you deeper into the Cretaceous world, the next investigation takes us to the other side of the equation, to Tyrannosaurus rex itself, and to the growing body of evidence that this animal was considerably more intelligent, more socially complex, and more perceptually sophisticated than we ever imagined. What was it really like to think like the apex predator of the Cretaceous? I'll see you there.